My brother fired me from his company. He had no idea I actually owned 51% of the shares. Now, let's continue today's story. The phone rang at 7:43 a.m. on a Tuesday that started like any other. I was making coffee in my Chicago apartment when Adrian's name flashed on my screen. My older brother never called this early unless something was wrong. "Selena, we need to talk." His voice was cold, formal, nothing like the Adrian who used to share midnight snacks with me growing up in South Side. "What's wrong? Is Mama okay?" "This isn't about Mama. It's about the company. I'm calling a board meeting for this afternoon. Be there at 3. The line went dead. I stared at my phone, heart racing. Adrian had been acting strange for weeks, shorter conversations, avoided eye contact at Sunday dinners, and whispered phone calls that stopped when I entered rooms. But this felt different. Threatening. I'd worked at Williams Tech Solutions for 5 years, ever since Adrian started the cybersecurity firm with our father's life insurance money. What most people didn't know, what Adrian seemed to have forgotten, was that I wasn't just his little sister riding coattails. I was a founding partner. After Daddy died, Mama insisted the insurance money be split equally between us. Adrian had the business idea, but I had the computer science degree from Northwestern and the coding skills that made his vision reality. We'd shaken hands in Mama's kitchen, agreeing to be equal partners. But Adrian had handled all the paperwork. I trusted him completely back then. That trust was about to cost me everything, or so he thought. By noon, I couldn't concentrate on anything. The board meeting loomed like a storm cloud. I grabbed the old file box from my closet, the one containing every document from our company's formation. Time to remember exactly what I'd signed 5 years ago. 5 years earlier. "Selena, you sure about this?" Daddy's voice echoed in my memory as I rifled through the dusty documents. He'd been in hospice then, weak but determined to see his children provided for. I remembered that conversation clearly. Adrian had pitched his idea for the cybersecurity company, eyes bright with ambition. "I've got the business connections, the sales experience. But I need someone who understands the technical side." "That's where I come in," I'd said, fresh out of college with a computer science degree and a head full of dreams. Daddy had smiled weakly. "You two always were a team. Adrian with the mouth, Selena with the brains." The insurance payout was $200,000. Adrian wanted to use it all for startup capital, but Mama had different ideas. "This money represents your father's life," she'd said firmly. "It gets split equally. If y'all want to pool it for business, that's fine, but legally, Selena owns half of whatever y'all build." Now, holding those incorporation papers, I saw the truth in black and white. Williams Tech Solutions, LLC. 2 founding members, Adrian Williams, 49%. Selena Williams, 51%. Mama had insisted I get the extra percentage point. "You're younger, you might get pushed around," she'd warned. "This way, you always have final say if needed." I'd laughed then, thinking I'd never need to use it. Adrian was my big brother, my protector. We were family. The irony wasn't lost on me now. Adrian had been so focused on handling the business side that he'd forgotten to read the fine print. Or maybe he'd never cared about the details, assuming his little sister would always follow his lead. That assumption was about to cost him everything. The conference room felt like a courthouse as I walked in at exactly 3 p.m. Adrian sat at the head of the table, flanked by our 3 other employees, Janet, our accountant, David, our head of sales, and Malik, our junior developer. Their faces told the story before Adrian opened his mouth. Janet wouldn't meet my eyes. David fidgeted with his pen. Only Malik looked confused, glancing between Adrian and me like he'd walked into a family fight. "Thank you all for coming," Adrian began, his voice carrying that false formality he used with difficult clients. We need to discuss some changes in company structure. My stomach dropped, but I kept my face neutral. What kind of changes? Adrian pulled out a folder, sliding papers across the polished conference table. Selena, your performance has been inconsistent lately. The Morrison project was delivered 2 weeks late, and the client complaints about communication have been mounting. I felt heat rise in my chest. The Morrison project was late because Adrian had changed the requirements 3 times without extending the deadline. The communication complaints came from one client who'd specifically requested to work with Adrian instead of me, then blamed me when Adrian dropped the ball. I've made the difficult decision to terminate your employment, effective immediately. The words hit like a physical blow. Janet was scribbling notes, probably calculating my final paycheck. David was studying the ceiling like it held the secrets of the universe. You're firing me. My voice came out smaller than intended. We're restructuring. Your severance package is generous, 2 weeks pay plus accumulated vacation time. Janet has the paperwork ready. Malik finally spoke up. Hold up, Adrian. Isn't Selena? This is a business decision, Adrian cut him off. Nothing personal. Nothing personal. This was the most personal thing he could have done. This company was our father's legacy, our shared dream, our family's future. And Adrian was ripping it away from me like I was some random employee who'd messed up one too many times. I looked around the table at these people I'd worked beside for 5 years, wondering which ones had known this was coming. I need a moment to process this, I said quietly. Adrian's smile was sharp. Take all the time you need. Security will escort you out once you've cleared your desk. Security escort. The words echoed in my head as I sat in my car outside the Williams Tech building, hands shaking with rage and humiliation. Adrian hadn't just fired me, he'd treated me like a criminal. My phone buzzed. A text from my cousin Jasmine. Girl, what happened? Malik just called me, said Adrian lost his damn mind in there. I couldn't even type a response. 5 years of my life, and Adrian had dismissed me like I was nothing. Like family meant nothing. The building's front door opened, and Adrian emerged with David. They were laughing about something, looking relieved. Happy, even. Adrian clapped David on the back like they'd just closed a big deal. That's when something inside me snapped. I wasn't just Adrian's little sister anymore. I wasn't the quiet partner who let him take credit for our joint successes. I was Selena Williams, computer science graduate, cybersecurity expert, and, most importantly, majority shareholder of Williams Tech Solutions. My phone rang. Mama. Baby, Adrian called. Said y'all had some kind of falling out at work. Her voice was careful, the way it got when she sensed family drama brewing. He fired me, Mama. Silence stretched between us. When Mama spoke again, her voice carried a cold fury I hadn't heard since she'd confronted my high school principal about racism in AP class placements. He did what now? Fired me. From our company. With security escorts and everything. That boy has lost his natural mind. Did he forget who actually owns that company? I don't think he ever knew, Mama. You handled the paperwork, remember? I trusted him to read it. Another long pause. Selena, baby, what you gonna do? I looked back at the building where my brother was probably celebrating his newfound freedom from his troublesome little sister. Where my desk was being cleaned out by strangers. Where 5 years of my work was being erased like it never mattered. I'm gonna remind him what family really means. I spent the next 3 days in research mode, becoming a detective in my own life story. Every contract, every client relationship, every financial decision, I needed to understand the full scope of what Adrian thought he'd taken from me. Malik met me at a coffee shop on Thursday morning, looking nervous but determined. I still can't believe he did that to you, he said, sliding into the booth across from me. None of us saw it coming. But you knew something was up, didn't you? Malik nodded slowly. He's been having a lot of closed-door meetings with Janet lately. And David's been acting weird, like he knows something the rest of us don't. What kind of meetings? Financial stuff, I think. I heard him on the phone with some investment group last week. Something about expanding the client base and bringing in new partners. My coffee cup froze halfway to my lips. New partners? Yeah. He's been talking about taking the company to the next level, getting serious investors involved. He kept saying the company needed fresh blood and different leadership. The pieces clicked into place. Adrian hadn't just fired me on impulse, this was planned. He wanted to bring in investors, probably sell shares, maybe even take the company public eventually. But first, he needed to consolidate control. He needed to get rid of me. Malik, I need you to do something for me, but I need you to promise you won't tell anyone. He leaned forward. What? I need to know everything about these investor meetings. Times, dates, who's involved. Can you do that without raising suspicion? Selena, what are you planning? I pulled out the incorporation papers, sliding them across the table. Malik's eyes widened as he read the ownership percentages. Holy shit. You own 51%. Adrian thinks he fired an employee. What he actually did was try to kick out the majority owner. Malik's grin was sharp and satisfied. This is gonna be good. This is highly irregular, Attorney Patricia Henderson said, reviewing the documents spread across her mahogany desk. She was Mama's age, with silver hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. But legal? I asked. Completely legal. You are indeed the majority shareholder of Williams Tech Solutions. Your brother cannot terminate your employment without board approval, and as the majority owner, you essentially are the board. Patricia had been Daddy's lawyer, the one who'd helped set up his will and insurance policies. When I called her Tuesday morning, she'd fit me in immediately. What are my options? Several. You could file a wrongful termination suit, but that's messy and time-consuming. You could call a board meeting and reinstate yourself, but that might create a hostile work environment. She paused, studying my face. Or you could exercise your rights as majority shareholder and restructure the company leadership entirely. Meaning? You could fire Adrian. The words hung in the air between us. 6 months ago, the thought would have horrified me. Adrian was my big brother, my business partner, my family. But the Adrian who'd humiliated me in front of our employees, who'd planned my removal behind my back, who'd forgotten that family loyalty was supposed to work both ways, I didn't know that person. What would that look like? Patricia pulled out a legal pad and began writing. Call a board meeting, which you have the right to do as majority shareholder. Propose new leadership structure. Vote on it, your 51% makes the decision final. Done. And Adrian? Adrian becomes what you were last Tuesday. A former employee. I thought about Adrian laughing with David outside the building, relieved to be free of his problematic little sister. I thought about the years I'd worked nights and weekends to build something I thought we owned together. I thought about the clients who trusted our work, the employees who depended on their jobs, the legacy Daddy had wanted us to build. How soon can we do this? The hardest part wasn't the legal maneuvering, it was keeping the secret. For a full week, I went about my life as if I was just another unemployed software developer, sending out resumes and networking with old college friends. Meanwhile, Patricia was busy behind the scenes, filing the proper notices and preparing the documentation. As majority shareholder, I had the right to call an emergency board meeting with 48 hours' notice. Adrian had made one crucial error in his planning. He'd assumed I would disappear quietly, maybe start my own competing firm or take a job with another company. He'd been so focused on getting rid of me that he hadn't bothered to secure the legal foundation of his power grab. On Friday afternoon, I sat in Mama's kitchen, the same place where Adrian and I had shaken hands 5 years ago. She was making her famous peach cobbler, the smell filling the house with warmth and memories. "You sure about this, baby?" she asked, not looking up from her mixing bowl. "He didn't just fire me, Mama. He tried to erase me. Like I never mattered, like family doesn't mean anything." "Family goes both ways," Mama said quietly. "You can't keep giving and giving while someone else keeps taking and taking. Eventually, you got to stand up for yourself." That evening, I drafted the meeting notice. Simple and professional. Emergency Board Meeting, Williams Tech Solutions, LLC. Monday, October 23, 2023, 2 p.m. Conference Room B. Agenda, Leadership Restructuring. I sent it to everyone's company email at exactly 5 p.m. on Friday, giving them the weekend to wonder what was coming. My phone rang 20 minutes later. "Adrian. Selena, what the hell is this? You can't call board meetings, you don't work here anymore." His voice carried that edge of panic I remembered from childhood, when he'd realized he'd gotten caught doing something stupid. "Check the incorporation papers, Adrian. I'll see you Monday." I hung up before he could respond. The war had officially begun. Monday arrived gray and cold, matching my mood as I walked into the Williams Tech building for the first time in over a week. The receptionist, Angela, did a double take when she saw me. "Selena. I thought you were on my way to Conference Room B," I finished. "How you been, Angela?" Her smile was genuine but confused. "Good, just surprised to see you." I was 10 minutes early, which gave me time to set up my materials and mentally prepare. Patricia had offered to attend as legal counsel, but I'd declined. This was family business, and it needed to stay that way. Adrian arrived at exactly 2 p.m., flanked by Janet and David. His confidence faltered when he saw me sitting calmly at the head of the conference table, legal documents arranged in front of me like weapons. "What is this, Selena?" Malik slipped in behind them, taking his usual seat. He caught my eye and nodded slightly. "This is a board meeting," I said. "Please, everyone sit down." Adrian remained standing. "You don't have the authority." "Adrian." My voice cut through his bluster like a blade. "Sit down." Something in my tone must have registered because he finally took his chair, though his jaw was tight with anger. I looked around the table at these people who'd been my colleagues, my team, my work family for 5 years. I called this meeting to address some irregularities in company management and to propose changes that will better serve Williams Tech Solutions moving forward. "Selena, this is ridiculous," David interjected. "You can't just waltz back in here after being terminated." "Actually, I can." I slid copies of the incorporation papers across the table. "Because I was never legally terminated. You cannot fire the majority shareholder of a company without proper board approval, which never occurred." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched understanding dawn on their faces as they read the ownership percentages. Janet was the first to speak, her voice barely a whisper. "You own 51%. I own 51%. Adrian's face had gone pale. That can't be right." "It's right, Adrian. Mama insisted on it when we incorporated. Said I needed protection from being pushed around." I looked directly at him. Turns out she was right. "How?" Adrian's voice cracked on the single word. "How did I not know this?" "Because you never read the papers you signed," I replied. "You were so excited about being the CEO, about having your name on the door, that you let Mama and Daddy's lawyer handle all the legal details. You trusted them to protect your interests." I pulled out another document. "Just like I trusted you to protect mine." The second paper was a copy of the investment agreement Adrian had been negotiating, the one Malik had told me about. I'd gotten it through my own contacts in the industry, people who knew people who talked to people. Meridian Capital Partners, I read aloud. $5 million investment in exchange for 40% ownership of Williams Tech Solutions. Signed by Adrian Williams, Chief Executive Officer. David went white. Janet actually gasped. Even Malik looked surprised, though he'd known about the investor meetings. You were going to sell 40% of our company without my consent, I continued. Dilute my ownership from 51% to about 30%, effectively stealing control of the business our father's insurance money built. Adrian found his voice. It's not stealing, it's growing the company. We need capital to expand. We needed capital. Past tense. Because as of this moment, you no longer have the authority to negotiate on behalf of Williams Tech Solutions. I slid another document across the table. Motion to remove Adrian Williams as Chief Executive Officer and appoint Selena Williams as Interim CEO, effective immediately. You can't. I can, and I am. My voice was steady, calm, final. All in favor. I raised my hand. The motion only needed one vote, mine. Adrian stared at me like he'd never seen me before. Selena, please. This is our company. Our dream. No, Adrian. This was our dream. What you did last week. That was your nightmare. The silence stretched for what felt like hours but was probably only seconds. Adrian sat frozen, staring at the documents as if they might change if he looked hard enough. This isn't how family treats family, he said finally, his voice hollow. The words hit like a physical blow, not because they hurt, but because of their stunning hypocrisy. Family. I stood up slowly, feeling 5 years of suppressed frustration finally finding its voice. Adrian, you fired me. You had security escort me out of the building like I was a thief. You've been planning to steal control of this company behind my back for months. My voice grew stronger with each word. You want to talk about family? Family doesn't humiliate each other in front of employees. Family doesn't erase each other's contributions. Family doesn't forget that we built this together with our father's money and our mother's wisdom. Janet was crying quietly. David looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Malik was nodding slowly, understanding finally dawning on his face. I gave you everything, I continued. My skills, my time, my trust. I let you be the face of the company while I did the work. I let you take credit for our successes and never complained when clients assumed you were the technical genius. Adrian tried to interrupt, but I held up my hand. I'm not finished. I defended you when Mama said you were getting too big for your britches. I covered for you when you overpromised to clients. I worked every weekend for 2 years straight to make your impossible deadlines possible. My voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And the first time business got challenging, the first time you thought you needed to make changes, you decided I was the problem. Not your poor planning. Not your overspending. Not your refusal to listen to anyone who disagreed with you. Me. The room was completely silent now. So don't you dare sit there and lecture me about family, Adrian. You broke this family the moment you decided I was disposable. The transition was surprisingly smooth once the initial shock wore off. Janet, it turned out, had been increasingly uncomfortable with Adrian's financial decisions but had felt powerless to speak up. David had been caught between his loyalty to Adrian and his growing concerns about the company's direction. I didn't know about the ownership structure, Janet admitted after Adrian stormed out of the meeting. If I had, I would have told him the termination was illegal. What's our real financial situation? I asked. She pulled out her laptop, fingers flying across the keyboard. Better than Adrian led us to believe, worse than it should be. The Meridian deal would have given us breathing room, but at a terrible cost. The numbers told a story of mismanagement and overreach. Adrian had been spending money on prestige projects, expensive office furniture, flashy marketing campaigns, client dinners at restaurants we couldn't afford. Meanwhile, he'd been delaying equipment upgrades and refusing to hire additional developers despite our growing workload. What about existing contracts? I asked David. Solid. Our retention rate is actually excellent, 93% over the past 2 years. The Morrison project issues were an anomaly, mostly caused by. He paused delicately. By Adrian changing requirements without extending deadlines, I finished. I know. I was there. Over the next hour, we developed a plan. I would take over as CEO immediately, focusing on operational efficiency and sustainable growth. David would continue managing sales but with better coordination with our technical capabilities. Janet would implement new financial controls to prevent the kind of overspending that had created our cash flow problems. Malik would get the promotion he'd been deserving for months, taking over as lead developer. What about Adrian? David asked carefully. I'd been dreading this question. Adrian was still my brother, still family, despite everything that had happened. But he was also a threat to everything we'd built. He has 49% ownership, I said finally. He's entitled to dividends and financial reporting, but he no longer has operational control. And if he tries to cause trouble? I thought about the investment deal he'd been negotiating, the way he'd dismissed my concerns, the security escort he'd arranged for my termination. Then we'll deal with it when it happens. Adrian didn't go quietly. Over the next 2 weeks, he tried every tactic he could think of to regain control. He called Mama, trying to get her to intervene. He threatened to sue me for wrongful termination, until his lawyer explained that you can't wrongfully terminate someone who actually owns the company. He even showed up at the office one morning, demanding to speak with his employees. This is still my company too, he declared to anyone who would listen. She can't just steal it from me. I was in my office, Adrian's old office, though I'd removed his motivational posters and replaced them with actual financial projections, when Angela called to let me know about the disturbance. I found him in the break room, cornering Malik and 2 junior developers I'd hired the week before. Adrian. My voice was calm but carried absolute authority. You need to leave. This is my company. This is your former workplace. You are no longer employed here, you have no operational role here, and you are currently trespassing. The new developers looked confused and nervous. Malik stepped forward slightly, a gesture of support that I appreciated more than I could express. I built this place, Adrian said, his voice getting louder. I made it what it is. We built this place. And I'm making it what it should have been all along. Something in Adrian's face crumbled then. For just a moment, I saw my big brother again, the one who used to walk me to school, who taught me how to ride a bike, who held me when Daddy died. Selena, please. Can't we work this out? We're family. The words hung between us, heavy with history and hurt. We'll always be family, Adrian. But we can't be business partners. Not anymore. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. I guess this is how it ends. No, I said quietly. This is how it begins. 6 months later, Williams Tech Solutions was thriving in ways I'd only dreamed about during the Adrian years. Our revenue was up 30%, we'd hired 4 new developers, and our client satisfaction scores had reached an all-time high. The Meridian deal had fallen through when they realized Adrian no longer controlled the company, but we didn't need them. With proper financial management and sustainable growth strategies, we were generating enough cash flow to fund our expansion internally. I was reviewing quarterly reports when Mama called. How you doing, baby? Good, Mama. Real good. And Adrian? That was the complicated question. Adrian had started his own consulting firm, trying to compete with us for clients. It wasn't going well, He had the sales skills but lacked the technical expertise to deliver on his promises. He'd reached out twice through intermediaries, hinting that he might be willing to come back in some capacity. "He's figuring it out," I said diplomatically. "That boy's pride gonna be the death of him," Mama sighed. "But I'm proud of you, Selena. Your daddy would be proud too." After hanging up, I walked through the office, checking on projects and chatting with team members. The atmosphere was completely different from the Adrian era, collaborative instead of competitive, focused instead of frantic. Malik looked up from his code review. "Johnson project is ahead of schedule and under budget." "How's that possible?" "Turns out when you don't change requirements every 3 days, things get done faster." I laughed. Revolutionary concept. As I headed back to my office, I passed the conference room where Adrian had fired me 6 months ago. The room looked the same, but everything else had changed. Sometimes the people who hurt us the most do us the biggest favor. Adrian thought he was getting rid of a problem employee. Instead, he'd awakened a sleeping giant, me. The girl who used to let her big brother take credit for her work was gone. In her place stood the majority owner and CEO of a thriving company, a woman who'd learned that family loyalty couldn't be one-sided, and that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable someone's worst impulses. My phone buzzed with a text from our biggest client, "Selena, the security upgrade is flawless. You guys are the best partners we've ever had." I smiled and got back to work. There was a company to run, and for the first time in 5 years, I was running it exactly the way it should be run. Some endings are actually beginnings in disguise. Stories like this deserve to be shared. If you feel the same, kindly subscribe, say hello in the comments, and tell us your city or country, we'd love to know.